Welcome to this very important course on lessons for healthcare practitioners from the Holocaust. I am Ariel, a physician and medical educator based in Toronto, Canada. And in this course, we will be discussing the essential lessons for training and practicing healthcare practitioners that come from understanding the Holocaust. Our goals in this course are not just learning history. Through this course, you will learn about the participation of physicians in the Holocaust, and in doing so, recognize how well-meaning doctors can engage in unethical sterilization, torture, murder, genocide, or be silent in the face of unethical behavior around them. You'll learn to identify discourse that contributes to gradual dehumanization and anonymization of patients. You'll recognize how intergenerational trauma can play a role in the lived experience of patients and colleagues as a result of the Holocaust and other tragedies. We'll engage with ethical dilemmas that stem from the Holocaust, for example, in the treatment of marginalized groups and in human experimentation. And perhaps most importantly of all, we'll discuss approaches to individual and collective resistance against the inherent possibility of abusing power in medicine, dehumanization, unethical behavior, and genocide. Ultimately, it is an ethical imperative for every person to fight for what's right and stand up against unethical behavior, and that is a lesson worth learning. Bottom line, you're in the right place. Thanks for joining us. Content warning. This material is definitely upsetting and definitely difficult to talk about. It includes references to dehumanization, unethical medical experimentation, torture, and murder, awful topics. But I will try to convince you that this is an exceptionally important subject, one that has the capacity to transform our approach to practicing medicine. I have no financial disclosures, but I do have emotional disclosures. My grandmothers were both survivors of the Holocaust, surviving Auschwitz, a death camp where over 1 million people were murdered. My father's mother lost her mother, father, and most of her siblings. She and her sister stuck together and survived, came to Canada, raised their families a block from each other, and lived in the same retirement home until my grandmother's death a few years ago. My mother's mother and her two sisters stuck together through the death camps, through the horror, and survived. Their parents and siblings were murdered, including their 3-year-old younger brother, whom I am named after. I am forever in awe of my grandmother's abilities to live through actual hell on earth and make happy lives on the other side for themselves and their families. I am forever grateful, but my family has in some ways always lived in the shadow of Auschwitz. First, why? Why should we study the Holocaust as healthcare providers? Good question. The Holocaust was the largest mass killing in history, and German medical doctors played a significant role in supporting, rationalizing, planning, and carrying out the genocide. And many critical ideas in ethics, social justice, and psychology of trauma emerged directly from the literature and legacy of the Holocaust. It is the source of modern research ethics, of the codification of the concept of intergenerational trauma, and it looms large in how dehumanizing discourse can lead to callous mistreatment and murder of oppressed groups, something at the forefront of our minds more now perhaps than in recent history. This material will make you uncomfortable. We are practicing or training to be healthcare providers, so it is so uncomfortable, so stomach-twisting to talk about doctors completely contravening their duties to help people, intentionally hurting people, and thinking that they are right to do so. I will ask you to lean into this discomfort, to look one of the most shameful periods in the history of medicine straight in the face. This is how we learn these important lessons. As you have this discussion, ask yourself, how is this making me feel? And why? So, some background. In the 1930s, Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, enacted policies and promoted ideas that persecuted and dehumanized Jews, blaming them for all of the misfortunes of Germany. This despite the fact that Jews were very assimilated and integrated into German society, including as doctors. Jews were portrayed as rats and subhumans, as parasites and viruses, as evil, selfish, and untrustworthy. This wasn't new. Nazi anti-Semitism drew upon over 2,000 years of anti-Semitic tropes. Anti-Semitism is unique in that it portrays Jews not only as less than, but also as more than, casting them inaccurately as more privileged than they are, rich, powerful, subversive, and untrustworthy, pulling the strings of the world, controlling world governments and economies, profiting off of death and war, self-serving, and unworthy of sympathy. And to the Nazis, this meant that they needed to be destroyed. During World War II, during the Holocaust, across Europe, approximately 18 million civilian non-combatants were rounded up and systematically murdered, including 6 million Jews, 250,000 people with disabilities, 250,000 Roma, thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses, gay men, black people, and political opponents, along with millions of Eastern European civilians. Physicians played a significant role in the Holocaust and in the Nazi Party. A large percentage of academics in the Nazi Party were doctors, and more than half of German doctors were early joining members of the Nazi Party. German doctors were at the forefront of the justification and then execution of the murder of those deemed undesirable by the Nazi doctrine. Doctors in Nazi Germany sterilized hundreds of thousands of those with chronic hereditary and psychiatric diseases, progressing to systematic euthanasia of deformed children and the mentally ill. Much of this sterilization and euthanasia occurred before the initiation of Hitler's final solution to murder all the undesirables. During the Holocaust, physicians played a significant role in the death camps, selecting who would be sent to be murdered in the gas chambers and who would be sent to the labor camps. They oversaw the gas chambers and performed cruel medical experiments on non-consenting subjects. We'll learn more about this in the section of the course on the history of the Holocaust and physicians' involvement in it. When I was 16 years old, I visited the death camps in Poland with a youth group, and while learning about this awful history, my peers remarked how inhuman the Nazis must have been. And I said, no, how human? Humans did this. They didn't want to think that way, but I want to challenge you to do so. Why is this a valuable way to think about it? Because humans do bad things, and trying to understand how a well-meaning human can think awful things and carry out atrocities will help us prevent ourselves from becoming those humans and challenging others who may be going down a bad path of dehumanizing others. So how could doctors possibly reconcile their duty to heal with genocide? Nazi doctor Fritz Klein, when asked about how he can reconcile his Hippocratic oath as a doctor with his killing of human beings, answered, "Of course I am a doctor, and I want to preserve human life. And out of respect for human life, I would remove a gangrenous appendix from a diseased body. The Jew is the gangrenous appendix in the body of mankind." Nazi doctors justified their actions by referring to the common good of the German people. They believed that they were purifying and protecting the German populace from Jews, whom they perceived as evil, a threat to German society. So remember this quote. And as we think about contemporary examples, think about how doctors today might justify dehumanizing discourse or unethical acts, and how we might identify and fight against these justifications. In this course, we will learn extremely valuable lessons for the practice of medicine in the modern world that come from studying the Holocaust, including the implications of the Holocaust and the ethics of medical experimentation, the concept of intergenerational trauma, which emerges from literature about the Holocaust, the consequences of dehumanizing discourse, the extreme consequences in this case, and the lesson that we must fight against unethical practices wherever we encounter them. It's not just don't do genocide. This seems too obvious to mention. It's learning that we are given a great deal of power by society, and we have to be aware of our risk of abusing it, that we are at risk at losing our moral compass and dehumanizing our patients and colleagues in small and large ways unless we learn to recognize dehumanizing ways of talking about people, that we all have the power to fight against unethical behavior in small and large ways. Thank you for taking this journey with us, plunging into territory that brings us face to face with almost unimaginable evil and tragedy. And by doing so, help to right the wrongs that were committed in the name of our profession and do good for future patients, for the future of healthcare, and for our societies and communities at large.